In this video, we're going to take a look at a blue shimmering ink from Diamine, their Blue Flame. Now, as always, there's timestamps down below so you can skip around, but if you've got the time, it really does help me for you to check out the entire video. Also, down in the description is a link to all of the blue inks that have been reviewed here on the channel. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. Let's get into the first writing sample done on 90 GSM Clairfontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. This isn't too bad when it comes to some of the shimmer. Some areas are much more reflective than others. I'm still going to talk about these as a whole, where we're going to say, in general, we see no feathering spread, halo sheen, no shading, because the shading just tends to, on the shimmering inks, sort of get lost in some of the shimmer. The extra fine took 8 seconds to dry. The medium took 13 seconds to dry. The scrubby says you could recover it if you smeared while you were writing. To have a range of experience with this ink, all of the writing samples are done with a Jinhao 159 with a 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a medium, and a Jinhao X750 with an extra fine. Then a Noodler's Ahab with a Fountain Pen Revolutions gold flex nib was used to write for a day and to take the notes for this video. The next writing sample is done on 52 GSM Tomoe River. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. Once again, talking about its total performance with no feathering spread, halo sheen, no shade. The shimmer goes pretty nice here. The extra fine took 14 seconds to dry. The medium took 27 seconds to dry. The smear test, you couldn't recover it if you smeared while you were writing. I don't know. This isn't as bad. This isn't as bad as we've seen with some of the others. I agree with Vita. There's a lot to learn by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. Put a line of ink down and immediately put it in the water for 10 to 15 seconds. Now we see the shimmer line of where the ink was put down, but we see all of that blue fled all the way up and really was gathering at the top. It was very surprising when I did the next one where I let it dry for 10 minutes. Now we see this is truly a true blue, but with 10 minutes there was some bonding with the paper and not all of that ink fled up. It gives the idea that there might be a little bit of resistance here. The next writing sample is done on 80 GSM Rhodia dot pad. No bleeding, no ghosting. Our general performance is pretty good with no feather spread, halo sheen. It actually shows shading here much better than it did on the other papers. You see when it comes to the extra fine, brown goes darker to lighter and fox goes lighter to darker. In the medium, brown goes darker to lighter to darker. Fox still goes light to dark. The extra fine took 9 seconds to dry. The medium took 15. The scrubby does show us some of the color variation, and you do get to see it even with all of the shimmer that's here. Now the smear test, the extra fine you couldn't recover if you smeared, but the medium you could. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. The smear is allowed to dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it didn't do horrible. I wouldn't use it, but it didn't do horrible. I mean, you can read everything that's there. It does have a little bit of spread and a little bit of some feathering, but all the information's intact. So if you really wanted to use it in a note-taking situation, you could. Water is reactivating and lifting most all of this ink up off the page. It only took water to get it out of that pen, and Pen Flush does everything that water does and not much more. The 1/3 bleach solution that you are not going to need, but it completely obliterates it. Just notice how shiny this swatch is. Not nearly as shiny as some of the previous swatches. The next writing sample is done on G-Lalo paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. I thought this would be a very good contrast, and the interesting thing is it really ate up the shimmer particles being a little bit more absorbent and laid, so I can lay it down. The 1.1 are actually, we'll just continue talking about them as their general performance. They, in general, have no feather spread, halo sheen, and the extra fine and the medium do show bits of shading that come through, brown going darker to lighter, over going lighter to darker. Extra fine took 8 seconds to dry. In the medium, the brown goes dark to light to dark, the over goes light to dark, and it took 12 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby isn't showing a ton of color variation, it's getting eaten up with this gray paper, but it does come through in the writing, which is good because most of that shimmer is lost with this absorbent paper. For the inks tested, the average viscosity is 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Diamine's Blue Flame has a viscosity of 1.54, which really surprised me how wet this ink is with all of its shimmer particles. If you're interested in how all that viscosity stuff is done, there's a link to that video down in the description. Now, let's take a look at Apica CD notebooks. No bleeding, no ghosting. Not doing bad on this paper, really. It's rather surprising sometimes what papers it does so well on. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen. It does shade, Diamine going darker to lighter to darker. The extra fine is just a tad lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen. It does shade, brown goes darker to lighter to darker. Fox goes darker to lighter to darker, 7 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen. It does shade some, not as standout. Fox goes dark to light to dark. The W of brown is a bit lighter than what's around it. Over is very dark, especially compared to the word dry, 10 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both don't show a ton of color variation. It's there. It shows itself here. I don't understand why the shimmer wasn't really coming through on this particular paper, though. For the inks tested, the average dry time was 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Diamine's Blue Flame has an average dry time of 15 seconds, making it normal. The last writing sample is done on Franklin Christoph paper. And we have no bleeding, no ghosting. I have to hold this at a little bit of an angle here so that we don't just get reflection, and it's just enough of an angle that you can see what's there. Now we'll talk about the general performance again, where really we have no feathering spread, halo sheen, no shade. It's doing very well, perfectly acceptable, but the glitter is really staying on top of this paper, which I was surprised. I expected this one to let the ink show through. The extra fine took 7 seconds to dry. The medium took 11 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both don't show color variation. We're really not seeing it in the writing. In the smear test, you could not recover if you smeared while you were writing. Instead of finding inks that look like Diamine's Blue Flame, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I decided to go with a nice black Parker Quink's Black or Permanent Black. If you'd prefer a different complement color, then down in the description are links to those playlists. So what do I think of Diamine's Blue Flame? The color of the shimmer is right here. It looks good. Also, the shimmer doesn't overpower the ink. It makes me a fan. I hate to say it. I might get a bottle. I have loved using this. Now, despite the fact that I have to hold it at an angle for you to see it in the writing samples, in person, it's much better to deal with, but it is rather reflective. So what nib and pen will give the best writing experience with this ink? A super wet medium will suffice in this case. Now, in general, I really do say go with wet and broad with your shimmer inks, but a really wet medium, I think, puts down a good tone. It's going to eat up the shading, but it's going to allow the shimmer to flow through without a problem. I hope you got something out of this video, and in the next video, we're going to take a look at KWZ's Maroon No. 2.